What's up, you guys? Welcome back to this week's Manga Sutra manga review, and in this week's video, we're going to be talking about a supernatural horror manga called Shibito no Koi o Kiku ga Yoi. Now, the manga starts off with our main character, Kishida, visiting the school nurse. Now, we see that Kishida gets sick a lot, and this isn't something that's unique to him. This is something that runs in his family, as his brother got sick a lot as well when he was younger. But what is particular to Kishida is the fact that he can see the apparition of his female child friend, Hayakawa. Now, Hayakawa has been missing for several days, and apparently her spirit has been lingering around the nurse's office for a while. When Kishida asks the nurse if there's any connection between Hayakawa and her, the nurse gets upset and doesn't answer his question. But later on in the manga, we see Hayakawa's spirit guiding Kishida to an unknown location in which he's knocked unconscious. And when he does awaken, he finds himself lying right next to Hayakawa's corpse, as well as several other corpses in the room. And when a woman appears, it turns out to be the school nurse. Although she's disheveled and she looks crazy, she warns Kishida of a serial killer that is portrayed as this big, hulking, crazy-looking monstrous humanoid. But for all of his size and all of his intimidation, Kishida doesn't see him. He doesn't hear anyone. And it turns out it's the nurse having hallucinations. And the nurse thinks that the killer is attacking Kishida. And it turns out she is the serial killer. She is strangling Kishida. As she's fighting against the killer, she's fighting against herself. The chapter ultimately ends with the nurse stabbing herself in the stomach, ultimately killing herself. And we learn that she killed her brother when she was young, and that guilt had carried over into her consciousness, and that developed into a second personality, which was basically a murderous serial killer. However, despite the fact that Hayakawa's justice has been pretty much enacted, and we found the killer, and her body was discovered, Hayakawa's spirit still lingers and still hangs around Kishida. What I like about this manga is the plot isn't linear. And what I mean by linear, it's like the character gets on the train in chapter 1, and in chapter 2, he gets off the train. In this manga, each chapter is its own mini-story. And each mini-story follows its own individual plot, its own individual theme. But unlike other mangas like Junji Ito, where you have several different short stories and several different little mini-stories in the manga, all of these mini-stories eventually do tie into the general plot of this manga, and that's what I love. It's a perfect blend between this semi-linear form, but also these individualized chapters. When one character dies in one chapter, that still applies in the future chapters to come. The events of previous chapters tie into the plot in chapters to come as well. And I think that's an interesting direction to take as far as a manga, because it blends the creativity of having several different mini-stories, but also allows you to still create a general plot line that people can follow. Now, art style wise, it is simplistic, and it gives me an impression, or it takes me back to mangas like Sayuri or Yume. But unlike Sayuri and Yume, in a lot of different panels and with the artwork of several different characters, especially as Hayakawa, it's very finely detailed. And in my opinion, it's a lot more closer to other very detailed mangas up there. And the short stories remind me of Junji Ito in the plot of several of them. And with some of the creatures and some of the monsters, it's kind of Lovecraftian in some places, and it's Junji Ito-like in some other chapters. In chapter 2, we have this cult where there was supposedly these Christians that were dismembered and tortured and burned, and they should have died hundreds of years ago. But Kishida finds a policeman's corpse with Hayakawa's help. The islanders didn't like it at all. They sacrificed the students to the Christians, who turn out to still be alive in this very monstrous, limbless, mutated form, and they're just these absolute monsters. They are able to rip off faces and just devour people in seconds, and they're just crawling towards these students in a horde. In chapter 3, we get a ghost Ferris wheel that appears at night and basically ferries away the living, and then it disappears. And if you're on the Ferris wheel, you basically fall to your death. And it seems like the carnival comes alive at night when no one else is around. It's supposedly closed down for years and decades. The Ferris wheel doesn't exist, but at night, if you're in that carnival ruins, it exists. It appears. There's people in the Ferris wheel. Everybody seems happy. There's this weird type of mesmerizing effect to it. And in another chapter, we see aliens, and another one is a haunted house and immortal couples. I just love that about this manga, with the creativity of these different mini stories and these mini adventures, and that's what keeps me reading it. And right now I'm about 8 chapters in, because each and every chapter going after that is just more interesting than the last, and each one has a different story that has a different take, and it's just weird. It's weird. And one, there's these weird people. Basically, there's this girl from Kishida's school that just moves into his place. And then her family moves into his place. And then when he asks her, what is she turns into like this little paper thin thing and just slides between the door. Like, how do you not like a manga like that? How do you not like a horror manga that has all these different aspects, all these different mini stories into it, but still applies to a generalized plot line? I don't know how you can do that. If I could say, out of the 8 chapters so far, if there's any characters that I hate, it's Shikino, the school club president from chapter 2. When the students were being sacrificed to these monsters in the cave, she's pretty much the club president, and she's pretty much the only girl. She took a handgun and pretty much pointed it at the rest of the boys, students, on the male students, and told them that they should die for her. That the only reason that they're there is to protect her. Now, granted, Kishida and his best friend Koizumi, they managed to make it out. They managed to jump over the cliff that they were trapped at the last second. I was happy at the end of chapter 2 because I was just like, yes, Kishida survived. And I was like, oh, Koizumi survived, his best friend. Yeah. Then I saw Shikino survive. I'm just like, fuck that girl. Like, she was basically letting, and she was responsible for several other students dying. And she has the audacity to be mean mugging Kishida on the boat back. Like, what? You pointed a gun at them, basically telling them that the whole purpose that them being there is to protect you. And that they should basically die because, well, you're guys and I'm a girl, so what? It's like, you know what, fuck Shikino. She could die. Like, she should have died in chapter 2. And in chapter 4, she's just kicking it with Kishida. Like, they're just having casual conversations at a restaurant like it's nothing. I'm just like, oh, no. Like, she's trying to share theories with this guy. But in the middle of chapter 4, she was leaving Koizumi and Kishida to die at the hands of aliens. Like, I just don't get it. If it was me and I was Kishida, I would have just been like, fuck you. I'm done with your shit. Like, why don't you just die? Like, don't drag me into your shit anymore. It's just, Shikino is just so fucking bitchy in my opinion. Like, she is self-serving. She's an asshole. She often gets them into situations like chapter 4 where they're in a life or death scenario, and this is because of her interest in the occult. And mind you, all these little mini stories, it's not like Kishida walks into trouble. It's not. I swear to God, it's not like Kishida is looking for trouble. Kishida is minding his own business and trouble comes to him. Trust me, trouble comes to Kishida, not the other way around. But Shikino, worst character in this manga. She should die. 8 chapters in, I still feel like she should have died at chapter 2. Second worst character that's recurring in the chapter so far, because it seems like the set of characters keep changing, but the main character, Kishida, he stays. Hayakawa, she's a constant. She's a core character. Koizumi is his best friend. He's a recurring character so far. Shikino is a recurring character. But out of them, second worst character is Koizumi. Because he's just unaware. He's unaware. Half the time, he's unaware that Shikino was willing to let him die in chapter 2. That Shikino had pretty much ran and left him to die in chapter 4. And then he gets mad at Kishida for basically being around Shikino. Because he likes Shikino. Like, Shikino's an asshole. Why do you care? Why do you really care? And in several situations, like, it just seems like Koizumi, he's more interested in trying to flirt with girls, when Kishida is just all about his business. Kishida's just about getting to the bottom of things. He doesn't really linger like Koizumi does. And Koizumi, he's just annoying. He's annoying. He doesn't offer anything to the plot so far other than the fact that he's Kishida's best friend, and Kishida needs somebody living to talk to, or else he's just going to be talking with Hayakawa throughout the rest of this manga by himself. That's pretty much it. And, you know, MVP of the entire manga is Hayakawa. I mean, she manages to save Kishida from several situations in which he's literally walking into death. Like chapter 4, he's almost walking into death. Chapter 3, he's almost walking into death. And somehow, she's able to reach out, snap some sense into him, knock him out of whatever trance he's in that is leading him to his death. And in near-death scenarios, she manages to MacGyver a way out. She manages to figure out an exit strategy or exit path for him to leave. And in other stories where it's not a dangerous situation, or if it's more of a mystery of solving something, she often has this otherworldly knowledge of things. She knows where spirits are. She knows where certain artifacts are. She knows exactly where to go, and she often points to Kishida in those directions. And that's what I like about Hayakawa. We haven't heard her say much at all, if anything, as a ghost, but I think they have a very strong friendship between Hayakawa and Kishida. I just wish she could actually talk to him, but then again, in my opinion, it's more cute that she doesn't talk. It's more cute that she doesn't talk. It's more cute that she conveys her thoughts and conveys her intentions through gestures and movements and signals, in my opinion. Would I say that this manga is worth reading? Hell yes. Like, hell yes. If you like Junji Ito and you like just odd, bizarre stories that have this horror-esque appeal to them, this is it. Like, we have ghost children cutting up people. We have paper beings inhabiting houses. We have mythical ghosts sucking out people's entrails. We have like ghost Ferris wheels in the middle of the night. We have everything in this manga, and I think that's just beautiful. The artwork is crisp. It's simplistic, but like I said, unlike Yume and unlike Sayuri with their very simplistic, down-to-earth art styles, this manga manages to cut a very firm balance between simplistic and heavily detailed in lots of its panels. This is VM. Is there any other mangas that you like that have different stories chapter to chapter to chapter? Or what type of plot style do you prefer? Do you prefer a manga with a linear plot line, or would you prefer a manga where each chapter is its own story? Like, comment, share, subscribe.